rules are the rules, right? If you don't know the rules of the road, then you're going to build products that don't necessarily work. If there's something outside of your area of expertise, you still coordinate with outside attorneys or contract attorneys or other law firms just to get the work done. So there's this big, great exchange, I call it, of work, of knowledge, of just help. It's happening organically. It's not something you can manufacture. Now it's really starting to take off, and I'm starting to see just a lot of activity there.
On today's Legally Speaking podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by Brian Scherer. Brian is the founder of HeyCounsel, a community and exchange where lawyers come together to help each other build their independent practices. He is also a fractional general counsel himself, working primarily with FinTech, consumer tech, and SaaS businesses as they enter growth mode. He has a wealth of experience as a product and privacy counsel at Blend, senior product counsel at Open Door, corporate counsel at Lending Club, and was an associate legal counsel at JP Morgan Chase & Co. So, a very big warm welcome, Brian.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is exciting. I'm not the normal podcast guest, but here I am.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and we like to bring lots of different voices and perspectives onto the show. And before we dive into your background and what you've been getting up to in and around the legal industry, we do have a customary icebreaker question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which is, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality of the law, if you've seen it, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real?
I mean, I've seen probably 1.5 episodes of Suits, and I would put it probably at like a 1. My wife and I are not good TV watchers. We literally don't even. We have a TV that hangs in our like family room, but it doesn't even work. So whenever we like give ourselves the pleasure of watching some sort of series, it's usually some documentary about some cold case or murder, which is not the most fun stuff to watch, but that's what we do. But yeah, I don't know. I would say Suits, just going off of what other people say, probably not very real, but entertaining.
Yeah. And I think, you've hit the nail on the head. And with that, we'll move swiftly on to talk all about you. So to begin with, Brian, would you mind telling our listeners a bit about your background and career journey?
Sure, yeah. The career journey is an interesting one, and it's certainly not linear at all. From Maryland, and I went to school, both undergrad and law school in Maryland. When I was 25, I moved to New York and took up a litigation job with JP Morgan, doing mortgage litigation, basically bank defense work. I didn't love it, and I was kind of searching for, what's the next step, and fell into basically what ended up being a career in FinTech. So I just got lucky with a company that I had never heard of called Prosper. They were one of the first, or kind of like the first mover in peer-to-peer lending. They made an offer to do legal and compliance work for one of their recently acquired lenders in Salt Lake City. I love skiing, so I was like, let's go. I packed my bags and moved from New York to Salt Lake, and that kind of began a four startup journey in terms of like hopping jobs all the way through multiple different types of FinTech companies. So Lending Club, their competitor, Open Door, which was like a house flipping marketplace, essentially buying and selling homes online, and then Blend, which was a B2B SaaS software for banks. So yeah, it was a journey. It ended up like I just started. I didn't know what FinTech was before I started, and now I feel like I am all like through and through FinTech.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a great breadth and rich experience you've had across all of those things you just mentioned there. You've recently also been outside general counsel at Scale. So for those who may be unfamiliar, can you tell us what is a fractional general counsel and what did your role involve there?
That's a great question. I feel like that's a question that everyone's still asking. What is a fractional general counsel? It really depends. It depends on the company that you're working with, and it depends on how you, the fractional GC, like to fashion your practice. I think the more experience you have as a lawyer and the more different types of practice areas you've been exposed to, your breadth of services becomes wider. And so I think a fractional GC with like 5 years experience is very different from a fractional GC with like 20 years experience. For me, I like to handle regulatory and commercial work. So my fractional GC practice is mostly me working with companies that have a lot of work to do in those areas. And then you kind of play like quarterback or point guard, or I don't know what the right soccer, it's a center field. What is it? So yeah, it's basically you end up playing point person for all things legal. And so, if there's something outside of your area of expertise, you still coordinate with outside attorneys, or contract attorneys or other law firms just to get the work done. So it's kind of like do everything all at once and be that point person for your startup or company.
Very big role, fair to say, and lots of responsibility and breadth. I want to kind of talk a bit about product development, because you provide counsel to startups across all stages of product development. So what are some of the common pitfalls, and you've probably seen quite a few over the years, in terms of fintech, consumer tech, or SaaS startups, and actually encountering, particularly at that very early stage, and how can they think about maybe avoiding some of these?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's interesting. Being a product counsel, you start to think as if you were a product manager, which you're not.
Yeah.
And the product teams and engineering teams are really good at reminding you that you're not. But I would say the thing that I've learned is there's a lot of opportunities, especially when you're building in regulated spaces. So like I was in FinTech for a while, and then like prop tech, so real estate in the US. And I think there's a lot of missed opportunities in really, like, if I could put myself in the shoes of like a product manager or someone designing a product, I don't know if they're always looking at opportunities in compliance and legal as business opportunities. And what I mean by that is, like, the rules are the rules, right? The rules of the road are, the federal regulations for fintech companies, the state money transmitter licenses, the everything from privacy to fintech, to financial services regulations, to just general consumer protections regulations. And then in like the prop tech world, it's all the again, the federal regulations, the state rules around how you can buy and sell homes. Those are the rules, right? And if you don't know the rules of the road, then you're going to build products that don't necessarily work. And I don't think a lot of newer product managers or newer companies really see those as opportunities to build something that makes, I guess, an immediate difference. And they kind of trip over themselves a little bit. So I would say it's not necessarily a huge pitfall. I think a lot of early stage companies get away with kind of skipping over certain regs, taking calculated risks, right? Like that's what companies do. It's the whole model of disruption. Kind of say, is that rule necessary, and are we harming anybody if we don't follow it? But I do think there's a lot of missed opportunities to understand why those regs and laws and rules were there in the first place, and then building into those and building a product with those in mind. So yeah, I would say that's probably a big missed opportunity there.
Yeah, and I love what you sort of mentioned about, jokingly, about the product side. We had Hemant Kashyap, who's the chief product officer of Clio, who support our show, and he said something around product in terms of people involved in that. He said they need to learn to fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And I thought it was a really great way of actually looking at it, in terms of really getting transfixed on what it is that potentially is the problem linked to the product, rather than just immediately focusing on trying to find a solution and actually get really obsessed with problems, because ultimately that's what you need to try and overcome. Okay, let's talk about the evolution of fintech, because as I say, you've worked across some big companies. What significant changes have you witnessed in fintech over the past few years, and how do you see things moving forwards?
Yeah, fintech has definitely been it's been evolving. It goes through different hype cycles, different trends that you begin to notice as you hang around. So I would say maybe 3 or 4 years ago, massive trend towards like bank partnerships and BaaS providers, so banking as a service providers. You had these newer fintech companies who were building technology, but they didn't have the bank rails, so they all had to partner with banks. And there's this massive influx of banks basically marketing their banking rails and services to these fintechs, right? And that creates the ultimate partnership. And then you have these BaaS providers that connect everyone. So the ecosystem was like rich with those. Those have kind of fallen out of favor due to regulatory enforcement actions across the board, and then some pretty big missteps by a couple well-known BaaS providers and bank partners. So as that's happened, I think that whole area has slowed of the industry. And then, we had the crypto craze, I would say like 2 years ago, that really took over FinTech as like the, star of the show. That hype cycle has died a little bit. And now it seems like we're kind of entering a hype cycle of like payments companies. I think there is like a new kind of resurgence in the bank provider, bank partnership model. But yeah, it's kind of these trends. They like, it's like anything. Like something's hot one year and then it's not. Mostly because the regulators get involved. They're like, oh, this is too hot. We need to check this out, and then it cools innovation there. So yeah, I would say like right now the big thing is our payments companies, cross border payments, remittances, and yeah, I would say that's probably the big trend right now.
Yeah, and I love that you talk about trends, and I'm probably going to butcher this completely, but I was at a talk with a keynote speaker recently who said, we overestimate how good technology and AI is in the short term, i.e. there's initial hype and we expect it to be amazing, complete, finished article right from the start, but then we actually underestimate the value it can be in the long term. And I think that goes in time, the hype and the cycles and the trends and what you're talking to. And it's really, really important that ultimately you're surrounded by experts and you know what you're doing in terms of getting that good, rich, actually information to make informed decisions. You touched on before privacy. It's such an important point because data is basically the new gold. Working with multiple companies on data privacy, could you elaborate from your experience what privacy by design actually looks like in practice, especially for those handling very sensitive data?
I think the simplest way to think about it is, if you were to start with the idea that privacy is sort of like this fundamental right, how would you build products? I think that kind of breaks down into a few things. One is making sure your users are very aware of how you're using their data. So it's not just a privacy policy, because the reality is no one reads them. And when I mean no one, or when I say no one, what I mean is like no one. like lawyers read that stuff. I mean, we would run tests at startups that I've worked at that will go unnamed, just to see like how many people would click on the privacy policy before they move forward, or the terms. And we made it very kind of visible, available, clear, and conspicuous. But no one clicks on them. No one reads them. I think 0.01% of people actually go through and actually read a little bit, and they'll make themselves known. They'll send you a message saying, "I saw this in your privacy policy, and I don't know if that's legal." It's like, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think. So it's more than just that. Like if you come from the assumption that nobody is actually reading these things, yet you still want them to understand how you're using their data, what do you do inside the product to make it very clear? And how do you also make it very clear that they are the controller of their own data, right? In an ideal world, we as users of products can control what they use our data for, or we know exactly how they're using our data and we can opt out of using the product entirely if we don't agree with it. And that's all it is. Like there's a lot of I think there's a lot more people in product now who understand it. I think 4, 5, 7 years ago, it was a real struggle to work with PMs on this exact topic, because they felt as though if they're using our product, they're giving us their data. That's how social media has been working forever. That's the products that we all grew up with. Like the team, in my generation that's been building products for the last 10 years, we grew up using Facebook and Instagram and things like that, where we're like, it's their data, it's not our data, right? I mean, that's not the reality, but that's kind of how we felt for so long. So it's walking that back, and it's starting from, is privacy a fundamental right? Yes. Okay, if so, how do we make it so that people actually have control over this right?
Yeah, no, really well articulated, and thanks for kind of going deep into that, because it's such an important point. And like you say, so many of those privacy policies don't go read. And I think it's really important that we educate and people actually give them advice. So thanks for sharing that. Let's talk about some of your most interesting cases, because there's probably been quite a lot from over the year. What's been the most interesting venture or startup you have advised, if you can share?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of companies building innovative products, there have been a few. I mean, Open Door, I thought, was the coolest thing. When I started at Open Door, I was just blown away by the size of the problem that they were trying to solve. I mean, they're essentially trying to create a liquid market of homes. I mean, they're CarMax did it with cars, right? They're like, if you come to CarMax, I don't know if you're familiar with CarMax. Are they in the UK?
Tell us more for this side of the.
All right, yeah. So CarMax is basically a company that allows you, as a owner of a vehicle, to just sell your car basically in a matter of, I don't know, hours or minutes. You go online, you click a few buttons, and you can get a purchase price and sell your car. And on the flip side, they create a market so you can go buy a car really easily. So they were like the original kind of online, we'll buy your car in seconds company. And
Yep.
Open Door wanted to take that concept to homes, right? Buy and sell a home with a click. And when you think about it, I guess from a surface level, you're like, why can't you do that? Why is buying a home so difficult? What makes it different than buying a car, than buying anything? Buying something on Amazon. So they wanted to create that Amazon experience for homes. Obviously, it's a massive challenge. There's 50 different states in the U.S., and within those states, there's even more kind of like local nuances when you go from city to city, from one zoning realm to another. There's different kind of like cultural aspects or like business aspects in terms of how title companies work, who pays for what in what locality, in terms of title fees and escrow fees and things like that. So it's like literally every single locality, not even just at a state level. It's like on a very local metropolitan level. There's so many nuances, so that the headache wasn't actually a technology one. The technology itself, easy to build. The operational overhead and the operational lift required to stand up something that was essentially a liquid market for homes was not overwhelming, because they're still solving it, but it's massive. I think it was massively underestimated how difficult that would be, but it also creates a massive moat for their business as they continue to grow. So I thought that challenge was probably the most interesting challenge that I was part of.
Today's episode is brought to you by Clio, hosts of the annual Clio Cloud Conference. Better known as ClioCon, it's the biggest conference in legal, and an opportunity that every legal professional should take advantage of. This year, ClioCon is headed to the iconic city of Boston, Massachusetts on October the 16th and 17th. A city steeped in legal history and renowned for its culture of innovation, Boston is the perfect setting for this incredible event. And right now is the perfect time to buy your passes before prices go up at the end of February. Join thousands of legal professionals, thought leaders, and industry experts to network, uncover the latest legal trends, gain groundbreaking insights, and learn practical strategies to elevate your practice. Whether it's mastering marketing techniques, streamlining your workflows, or enhancing client relationships, ClioCon offers actionable insights that make a real difference. Past prices will never be this low again, so act now. Visit ClioCloudConference.com to secure your pass today. Now back to the show.
so many things you need to think about, so many different variables. But what an amazing, problem to try and solve in terms of falling in love with the problem, as I referenced earlier. I think it'd be amazing to be able to kind of see that transfer over here. Just buying a home and selling a home in the UK can be quite a lengthy and laborious process. I want to now switch lanes to talk about something I'm passionate about, which is community. And I know it's something you are equally passionate about, because you're also the founder of HeyCounsel, a community and exchange where lawyers come together to help each other build independent practices. So would you mind explaining to our listeners a bit more about HeyCounsel and why you started it?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something I'm passionate about and have kind of fallen in love with after I created it. So when I was leaving my last in-house role, Blend, I actually created essentially a marketplace for lawyers. So I got started building this thing, because I guess to reference the quote, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. I think I fell in love with the solution when I started building a marketplace. I really wanted to build this like marketplace of legal talent. I had seen some people have success doing so, some companies in our industry, but I always felt like, I could do it better, and that there was still a massive opportunity in servicing kind of like the companies that I've been working with for the past, 8 to 10 years, which are these startups, specifically early stage startups. What I realized, though, is that one, it's a very difficult problem to solve. Two, I started to recognize the incentives were such that when building a marketplace, you start to go towards customers that provide the highest lifetime value to you, and basically that causes you as a marketplace operator to migrate more towards larger companies, so not the smaller fish. Or if you wanted to migrate down towards the smaller fish, you ultimately would be working with high volume transactions, which are less personal. It kind of starts to begin to feel very transactional. So I pivoted pretty quickly in like seeing that like the roads ahead of me as they diverged, and I was like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. What do I really want to build? Well, we had this great talent pool of lawyers who would join this marketplace to get work, and I like fell in love with just the idea of building for them. So I basically turned this marketplace into a community overnight, and it's been an epic experience. We have because like one of the main things that I wanted to focus on was getting the best talent pool ever. All of a sudden, I switched to a community, and I had this incredible group of lawyers who, honestly, I was lucky to get in the first place, who now were all helping each other launch their own independent practices and be legal freelancers or legal business owners, law firm owners, all that stuff. So it's really become a labor of love and an extremely fun experience.
And the testament of the power of community, it's so powerful. I speak to so many people in law firms or lawyers over here in the UK, or generally, like, if you can build a really strong community, like the results of that is just going to be so fulfilling intrinsically, like for yourself, like you're mentioning there. But the shared knowledge, and I guess that's where I want to lead to next, in terms of what are some of the resources actually available to those who join this community, and could you tell us about any weekly events or things that take place? So again, people listening could potentially become part of HeyCounsel, because I think it's so important to get this knowledge shared.
Yeah. So maybe I'll take a step back and I'll just tell you a little bit about the mission, because the mission kind of explains what we're trying to do. I think of HeyCounsel as creating basically the environment of a large law firm without the large law firm for the independent lawyer. So one of the advantages that you get when you're part of a law firm is you can go knock on the door of the person next door, and or in the office, or sitting in the cubicle next to you, and ask them a question, any question, right? It could be, hey, how you doing today? Or it could be, do you have this type of a document or template, or have you seen this problem before? Or, what are you doing with your career? Like, what are your plans? All these things are important as you're growing your own career and, working on a day-to-day basis. But independent lawyers don't often have that community, especially now that we are all working in front of a computer, usually in our living rooms or our offices, if we're lucky enough to have an office in our house. But yeah, it's basically creating that environment and that support system for the independent solo boutique lawyer. So the resources are much like the resources you'd find at a law firm, right? We have a large library of documents. We have, while we don't provide a lot of the technology tools that lawyers use, we provide discounts so that people can get them at steep discounts to what the rack rates are. We host events. So, similar to law firm networking stuff, we host events, we host learning experiences so lawyers can learn from each other. And most importantly, we allow and often push and facilitate lawyers collaborating together on projects. So if one client comes to a lawyer in the HeyCounsel community and has a lot of work to do, much of that work that one lawyer can't handle, they can then work with a lawyer that they know inside the community that has been vetted by themselves, their peers, and they've seen interact with other lawyers. So there's this big, great exchange, I call it, of work, of knowledge, of just help that's happening. And it's happening organically, right? Like it's not something you can manufacture. Now it's really starting to take off, and I'm starting to see just a lot of activity there.
Yeah, and it's great, and there's such an energy when you get that community together, isn't there? When you bring people, and like you say, just being able to tap someone on the shoulder could just be, from a well-being perspective. How are you doing today? And having someone to talk back to you. Maybe loneliness is one of the biggest factors that particularly in sort of starting a business or being a solo practitioner, whatever it might be. So that sense of community is great. But then, like you say, in terms of actually helping one another when it comes to things, challenges, whatever's going on. So looking forwards, then one thing I've learned from community as well is you need to keep the community fulfilled, and so you can't stand still, because particularly if it's valuable to the modern times, which is what really people want to be part of a community, it's going to help them through their careers, not now but moving forwards. What are some of the future plans you've got in mind for HeyCounsel, and how's that going to benefit current members and potentially future members?
Yeah, so I'm doubling down on just quality of members and quality of engagement. So from a community aspect, I'm both building fun little features to make it easy for people to interact. For example, when people need to send work to each other, what does that workflow look like, right? It's not just I'm sending a message to 300 people on a Slack group. It should have structure to it. It should be delightful, and it should get the job done like very, very quickly. So it should ping the right people. Those people should see the opportunity. And they should be able to start collaborating that day. So it's building like fun little features like that, but it's also making sure that we have the right vetting process on the front door, right? Making sure the right people are inside the community, and that when they enter the community, that they're really introduced to everybody, right? You don't just like slide in the back door and watch everyone mingle, right? If you want to, that's there, but I want to make sure people have a really strong onboarding experience so that they immediately feel like they're part of the party and that they understand what's going on and they understand all of the benefits that HeyCounsel brings. We've built a really cool platform. We use Slack for our community in terms of communication, but we've been so lucky in that we have a true, I didn't know what the term 10x engineer was, but I have one. and now I'm like, it's like he honestly has been such a wind behind our sails, whatever that term is. He's pushed us into an area that I didn't think we would get to in terms of technology. So we're so lucky to have that, and we're building cool new features every day on this platform that really makes it like a community network. It both. It's not just a chat group. It's not just a lobby. It's there's a lot of infrastructure there too. But one thing that we are constantly thinking about is what tools can we provide lawyers outside of the community to market themselves, to truly build a practice and a brand. And I would say looking forward, very, very soon, we'll be launching some really cool products that they can use outside of the community. So it's a strategy I call it inject the tech. So we're injecting technology into the community and letting these lawyers kind of become super lawyers, so to speak. So you'll be seeing a lot more, I think, on that front in the next couple months.
I love that. Inject the tech. And one of the words that I love that you used was delight. And there's a real difference between building an audience and building a community. And, anyone can kind of get a number of people together, but actually having an engaged community, and the fact that you are focusing on what I see is the 1%. It's very easy to build a community to ignore them. But like you say, how can we make this workflow better? How can we make sure everyone gets a warm welcome, gets introductions to people, doesn't feel lost, doesn't get a sense of inclusion? And I think if you work on those 1% and tweak on them, and like you say, you've invested in areas where you can really build infrastructure so people feel part of a community and get value from a community, then it's only going to be successful. So I love what you're doing. Big fan of what you're doing. That's why we're really keen to hold the conversation today. I guess to go back to some sort of careers advice from your years in business, what advice would you give to those interested in pursuing a career as a lawyer, particularly specializing maybe in the worlds of fintech and financial services?
Yeah, it's a good question. I try to think about the advice I would have liked to get before I even jumped into being a lawyer. And it probably would have been, make sure you want to be a lawyer first. And I don't know exactly how that manifests for everybody. I think some people are lucky enough to know exactly what they want to do when they're starting out. And then some folks, and I put myself into the second category, kind of find their way haphazardly. But it all makes sense in the end. So maybe my advice is, if you're part of group one, then just lean in and follow your passion. Like, absolutely. There's nothing that can substitute for the energy that you get from truly loving what you do. So if you already know what that is, just go. And if you don't know what that is, don't panic because life has a funny way of showing you what you need to do. And I cannot purport to know anything else about other people's career, because I am the ultimate. I don't love taking advice. I definitely listen, and then I just smile, and then I just am like, well, I'm going to do it this way. And that's probably, to my own detriment. And I know that, but there's so many different people out there, so many different passions, so many different stories and walks of life that, I always try to not give advice when I can, if that's the biggest non-answer ever. So,
but I love that you talk about following your passions, because I think it's so true. We've lived in the years of generations gone past who've been in careers that haven't been as fulfilled as they wanted because they hadn't been brave enough to follow the passion. And I think now, with modern technology and resources available, if you have a passion, then go all in. And like you say, maybe if it doesn't, you're not quite there yet. Run your own race at your own pace. Non-linear careers, backwards sometimes to go forward, sideways, whatever it is. That's all good stuff. The main thing is just to keep going, and I think the power of community can definitely do that. So I guess before we finish up, Brian, where can our listeners go to find out more about you or the HeyCounsel community? Feel free to share any websites, any social media handles. We'll also share them with this episode for you too.
Awesome. Yeah, I would say HeyCounsel.com. It's the webpage with all the information about our community, and if you are interested in talking more about it, you can reach out on LinkedIn, Brian Scherer. Pretty easy to find me. And then, I would say those two things. And HeyCounsel is one of these no risk type things. If you join, you don't like it, you get a refund. It's not an expensive monthly membership at all compared to, I think, what other kind of legal communities or legal memberships are like. So come try it out. I know you'll love it. So, and if you don't, then no risk, no harm.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Brian. Really enjoyed having you on the show today. So from all of us on the Legally Speaking podcast, sponsored by Clio, wishing you lots of continued success with your career and indeed the HeyCounsel community. But from all of us, over and out. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com, for the link to join our community there. Over and out.
Exciting news, listeners. We're pleased to announce another upcoming special mini-series, Legally on the Move, Careers, Tech and Insights from Dubai. In this exclusive series, we're taking the podcast to Dubai, a city that's redefining legal careers, leading in tech innovation and setting the stage for transformative global insights. Here's a sneak peek of what's coming your way. Career stories from top legal professionals thriving in Dubai's unique legal market, the latest on AI, blockchain and how legal tech is reshaping the future of law, thought-provoking conversations on diversity, leadership and building global connections. And here's the best part. We'll be recording in some of Dubai's most iconic locations, capturing not just the insights, but some of the incredible energy of this vibrant city. So stay tuned and get ready for Legally on the Move. Trust us, you won't want to miss this journey. Over and out.